So the extremely overpaid hosts on MSNBC are sharpening their election analysis skills. Here's Mika Brzezinski with one of the most superficial takes I've ever heard about this election. There's a total conflation here between Trump and Bernie, and Trump and Warren and Bernie, because style stuff.
It's two candidates, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, at the top tier, who have plans that seem fantastical, going up against Trump, who sends out fantastical lies. It feels like Trump and Clinton all over again. Not a good matchup because they have synergy in ways that make Americans uncomfortable, I think, or cancel each other out. And then can Joe Biden do it? I think still a question, but I see less so. I see him performing well out there, no?
You see Joe Biden performing well out there? These people are so biased, it's comical. Like, when you watch this show, I tell you my bias up front. Guys, my ideology is social democratic. I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter. Here are the ideas I like. Mika Brzezinski never, ever has said, oh, just so you know, I fancy myself a centrist, and here's who my preferred candidate is, and here are the ideas I like. She never did that. Because she has this veneer of, I'm objective. She's nowhere near objective, but she has to pretend like she is. And so when she gives an analysis like this, it's presented as like, this is truth. I'm giving you truth. But look at what she said. She thinks Biden is doing better. Based on what? Based on what? The dude could still barely put together a sentence, and he's out there just throwing haymakers at better candidates, Bernie and Warren, and it's embarrassing. So what are you basing that on? Nothing. Everything she says here is the conversation happening in her circles, in her, upper class, very wealthy, elite media circles. That's where this comes from. That's where this worldview comes from. She said, well, you got like Bernie and Warren, and they have these, quote, fantastical plans, and Trump tells fantastical lies. So, they got like the same synergy, and it like cancels each other's synergy. What? It's the same synergy, and it like cancels each other out. So that argument there is more of like a style argument. Like, oh, they're not professional, and they're not centrist, and you got Trump who's, goes off the rails, but then you got Bernie and Warren, and they're like, going off the rails too, and they have fantastical plans. And guys, how many times have we gone over this on this show? It's basically every segment we talk about this, but all Bernie Sanders wants is to catch up to the rest of the developed world. That's it. Social democracy is just catching up to the rest of the developed world. To act like those are fantastical, to act like those are impossible, that shows how deeply biased Mika Brzezinski is in favor of the status quo here. And she doesn't even realize it, which is embarrassing and sad and pathetic, and shows how uneducated she is on politics here. But that's not fantastical. It's not even close to fantastical. It's common sense, actually, one could argue. But this is the kind of analysis that you get on mainstream outlets. And, as my buddy Jimmy Dore likes to say, you wonder why people get their news from YouTube. Because who watches, other than the top 1%, and other than people who are already in elite media circles, who watched this and shook their head in agreement? Like, oh yeah, sure, Biden's doing well, and Bernie and Trump are the same, and Warren and Trump are the same, and because, it's horseshoe theory. Oh my God, the far left and the far right, and they meet, and they're like the same thing, even though when you look at the plans proposed, and you look at the policy direction of Trump versus Bernie, they are diametrically opposed. Just couldn't be more opposite. Bernie wants to end war, Trump is increasing war. Bernie wants to end sanctions, Trump is increasing sanctions. Bernie wants to regulate the economy to make sure we don't have another crash, Trump is deregulating the economy. Bernie wants to raise taxes on the rich, Trump wants to cut taxes on the rich. Bernie's in favor of left-wing positions on social issues. Trump is in favor of right-wing positions on social issues and caters to evangelicals day in and day out. They could not be more different. If Mika Brzezinski was doing her job, she would sit there and go through each policy position with you from Trump versus the left-wing candidates, but she doesn't do that. She doesn't do that because she can't do that, and because it would make Bernie look good, and it would make everybody else look bad. So instead it's, I don't know, they're kind of the same because they have fantastical plans, and, But Trump is fantastical. The left is fantastical. And, you got the serious candidates like Biden, and but he's doing better. He's doing better. You don't want the synergy of the far right and the far left to cancel each other out. I don't even know what that means. What does that mean? The synergy cancels each other out. What? I think she's trying to say, well, it's kooky on the left and kooky on the right, and just you got a reasonable center. Go to the reasonable center, yeah. The corporate centrists are just status quo defenders pretending like they're truth tellers. And Mika Brzezinski's doing well, and everybody sitting around her table is doing well, and they don't understand the pain that's actually out there in America. They don't understand that 78% of workers are living paycheck to paycheck. 70% of Americans, I should say, are living paycheck to paycheck. Half of workers make $30,000 a year or less. Wages haven't budged since the 1980s. We're bombing 8 different countries. We're waging a shadow war in Africa. Our infrastructure is crumbling. She doesn't understand that. She doesn't care about that because politics is all a game to her. And in this game, you get to sit there and pretend like you're serious and say, yes, Trump is bad, but so is the far left. Yes, and they're the same. Similar synergies. I don't know what that means, and she doesn't even know what that means. All she knows is she's been, coached her entire career to generally believe the far right is scary and crazy, and the far left is scary and crazy, and aren't they kind of the same? They're not the same at all. And in fact, the centrists that Mika Brzezinski supports helped lead to the rise of the far right. They made it so fake populists could easily exploit the system because people knew the establishment was screwing them. So she's more of the problem. And she has no idea what she's doing. And in a world that made sense, she wouldn't be in this position that she's in. But the world doesn't make sense. So instead, we have an establishment media and a mainstream media that's terrible at their job, and you guys have to unfortunately go to places like YouTube and this show to get anything even remotely close to truth.